Vi kjører på med nye lytterspørsmål. Velkommen til del 2 av vår Q&A med David Lynch, der vi får svar på alt det dere lurer på om Liverpool.
I've drummed it into our players that they are privileged to play for you.
David, we are back for part 2 of the Q&A. Still a lot of questions to get through. First one we're going for in this part is from Steinar, because Arne Slot talked a lot about summer plans before he got sacked. You know, where did those plans go? And I could also add the question from Bjørn: how much is the new manager involved in the transfer market? Are they following a plan that was made before he started, or how much influence does he have?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the stuff that we're seeing happening now is part of a plan that was formed before they decided to change the manager. I think it was an internal acceptance that they needed to sign wingers really badly in this window. They needed to add pace, and so for that reason, kind of Diamonde, Barcola are not targets that have kind of come out of the blue or have been pushed by Iraola. And those are targets that will have been long agreed as ones they wanted to try for in this window. Where he is able to have kind of maybe some influences that you see with the Victor Munoz signing, for example, there is kind of talk internally at Liverpool that he had some influence on that. He was able to give his view on the player who's maybe a little bit more familiar, who would have been on. They maybe have a short list of kind of 10 wingers, for example, and we need to do it for this amount, and this is how we need to kind of put the squad together. For him to be able to say, well, I'm comfortable with this player, I'm familiar with him, this is what I know about him, to just kind of add to the knowledge base. And that's always welcome, because we do get a bit bogged down sometimes with talking about Liverpool and the way they scout and kind of talking about, they're so obsessed with numbers, but they are, it's kind of the approach is very kind of, an all-round approach to scouting players. They are very much, about in-person scouting, about finding out about personalities, doing the old school stuff, a lot of video as well, not just about the numbers, and kind of then they add it together to this big picture, and it's then a group discussion then to, should we pull the trigger on this player? So the more knowledge you've got about that player, the better. And so in that sense, Iraola will have an influence on who's signed when he's able to contribute his views on that. But it's only ever part of a wider thing. So I don't think there's been a big sea change in kind of the targets that they were aiming for in this summer. Maybe small tweaks because of considerations about this is the type of football that this manager wants to play versus the previous manager, and maybe, intensity in midfield is kind of a big change. So I think Adam Wharton might have been higher up the list this summer if not for the change. But it's not like he's able to come in and dictate what the targets are. It's a group effort, and across a number of disciplines, statistics, like I say, old school video scouting, in-person scouting, the stuff about kind of personalities as well. So he's had some influence, but not like an outsized influence on what it is. So it's just part of a kind of wider group, and in terms of how they scout players, really.
That's not been the only change as well this summer, with Michael Edwards leaving, Mike Gordon coming back in a more active role, and Richard Hughes is expecting to go to Saudi Arabia, and then maybe his assistant Woodfine is taking more responsibility. What do we know about who makes the big decisions now?
Yeah, so I think with Michael Edwards, it's worth saying, I don't think that should have too big an effect on the kind of day-to-day running of the club. The reason he is leaving is because his job no longer exists. So, there's not anything really where he needs to get involved on day-to-day transfers at Liverpool. They have a big enough team to do that. Sporting director, assistant sporting director Julian Ward can chip in if needed at all, if they somehow need help with that. They've got, of course, the scouting team as well. So, they're not short in terms of recruitment staff. So him leaving shouldn't have too big an effect. Of course, Richard Hughes will be a different thing. That's someone they're going to have to, they're going to have to fill that gap. I would say about David Woodfine being kind of touted as stepping up into that role is it was kind of played down to me, the fact that I know a lot of that kind of came from the fact he did the tour with Iraola. It was played down to me that was, a fairly normal part of his job to do, to be part of that. Maybe an element of Richard Hughes not so much wanting to be seen to be at the forefront of that on the cameras, when he had just taken what he was considering a tough decision to dismiss Arne Slot as well. And so I think those are factors. Maybe, David Woodfine, no doubt, with his experience, will be in the running, but I don't think that decision has been quite reached yet. So we're maybe putting 2 and 2 together and making 4 or 5 at the moment. It's hard to say, but I don't think that's baked in at the moment that he will be the successor, albeit he could be. So yeah, a lot of kind of changes going on really behind the scenes. And I think for this summer, Liverpool are in an okay position. Richard Hughes is seeing out the remainder of his contracts at the moment. He's gonna take on that role in Saudi, but is committed to his work at the moment. David Woodfine helping him, as I say. And then they've got a decision to make after that. But it's it's not ideal, I would say, in terms of my view is that, sporting directors are supposed to bring continuity. They're supposed to be at the head of the project. And so to be chopping and changing again when Richard Hughes was supposed to signal a new era of moving away from that is quite disappointing. But I guess it is also the modern game, and they don't generally last longer than 2 years at any club. So I also probably shouldn't be surprised by it at all.
And looking at the squad, I think many fans are worried about it going into the season with injuries and, as you mentioned, maybe a lack of pace still, although they're working on new players. So I'm going to merge a lot of similar questions from Anders, Eirik, Edmund, Magnus, and Vegard. Looking at the squad, what do you think the main priorities should be? Because here they have mentioned everything from centre-back, right-back, even left-back, defensive midfielder, and of course, new wingers. How would you prioritize those positions?
It has to be the wingers for me. I think the lack of pace to Liverpool just absolutely killed them last season. They were not threatening at all. And I think part of that was partly the coach's approach to kind of just get the ball into the final third and kind of see what happened. I didn't see enough kind of repeatable moves, but equally, I think he was let down by the squad he was given as well. I think, there just wasn't enough quality in wide positions for Liverpool to consistently win games or pace in general in the team. So that is something that they have to address. And I say it a million times, really. I just think that goals and quality and pace, you might not be perfect at the back, but if you've got that, it can cover up for a lot of it. And I look at the example is people would say, well, look at Arsenal's back six or whatever. It's incredible. And, they're going to walk the league again. But what I would say as well is that, Arsenal aren't perfect. I look at their forward options and I think they're a million miles from kind of high quality. And I think, if you take away their set piece goals last season, that's not a team that should be challenging for the title really, because they're so reliant on seeing out games and being defensive and to break games so often. They are incredibly reliant on corners. So they're an unusual Premier League winner in that sense. And so I look at them and I think you kind of don't have to be perfect to go and have a challenge next season, because Arsenal weren't perfect. If Liverpool put it together in attack and can kind of outscore teams and the total to win the league is in the mid-80s again, they can at least be close and get up there. Even without sorting the things at the back. And I think their route to doing that is to score goals. So for me, it's the number one priority really is to sort that out, albeit I would like to see a little bit of work at the back as well.
Yeah, the hope is that at least the centre-backs will come back from injury, and then we have four exciting, one maybe not young and exciting, but one very solid one in Van Dijk and Leone and Jacquet, and maybe a new signing would block the road for them as well. So you could see the thinking there. But Eirik also mentions the homegrown status. It's not easy maybe buying new players because it's quite full with the maximum amount of foreign players.
Yeah, so it's something they've got to be careful about. So I think at the last count, I think I'm right in saying that they got 16 at the moment, maybe. Of course, Jacquet won't count towards it, which is good because he's under 21, so that's good news with him. But yeah, it's something they have to think about, because if Barcola comes in, he instantly takes a spot, albeit Gakpo could go out as well, so that opens it up. It's balanced, but it is something they have to consider, definitely. They don't have an infinite amount of spots. I mean, I've seen people saying this squad needs 5 or 6 to sort the depth out. It's just not possible to add 5 or 6 to the squad. You maybe add 1 or 2, but then after that, you are going to have to let people go, because otherwise the numbers aren't going to make sense. So you can't run that sort of squad. I know people might say the squad's thin because they think certain players are useless. But that's a different point. That's his point of we have to sell him to get X, Y, or Z. That's a different argument than saying the squad is actually thin. Like in numbers, it's not a million miles off the limit. So it's something Liverpool have to think about. It's another reason, by the way, actually, Mbai would be a good signing to give you even more depth up top, because he, again, he's 18, so he wouldn't count to your non-homegrown spots. So, and in fact, actually, if you do sign him this summer, in 3 seasons' time, he will count as homegrown, because the Premier League rule is that if you have 3 seasons prior to turning 21, you can include the 3rd season can be the season in which you turn 21, by the way. He would count as homegrown. So, again, another kind of tick in the box for him as a potential signing, but also an example of how Liverpool might need to work it to give themselves more spots.
And different rules in Champions League, I guess.
Yeah, so I think a lot more convoluted. So more convoluted so is that I can't just reel it off as quickly as I did there with the Premier League one. So not entirely sure how that one looks, but again, something Liverpool have to consider when they're adding to the squad.
Yeah, for those who have played Football Manager,
yeah,
it's been a struggle there with unhappy players because you couldn't register them for both tournaments. So I think Mbai would count as non-homegrown in the Champions League, at least for a couple of years. So that's the challenge there. But as you mentioned, actually the squad isn't that thin. There's a lot of players in the squad, but maybe everyone doesn't think they're at the level. Thomas mentions Gakpo, Endo, Tsimikas, Mamadashvili, Chiesa, McAllister, Frimpong, Jones, Elliott, and Gomez as players who are not quite at the level you would want. Do you agree?
Not with all of them, I would say. I mean, if Gomez can stay fit, he would be of the level. The problem is that he can't, and I think that sale should have been made a while ago, really, when he was at the peak of his value, because it's just been a bit of a disaster including him in the squad, really, because he's never there to be a number. But, some of the others you go through there, I think Jones is definitely good enough. It's not an argument for me. It's just the fact that he maybe wants to leave the club is the issue there, and they can't agree on a new contract. So we'll see what happens with that. I lean towards that he will depart in the end, unfortunately. With others, Endo is someone who can fill in multiple positions, really good pro, good experience, not on mega money. I think it's worth having someone like that around. Chiesa, I think they would quite like to offload because of the money he's on. He doesn't seem that keen on that. But maybe one, if they keep signing wingers, they keep signing forwards, one to keep an eye on before the window ends, that you might just think, look, if I want to play, I'm going to have to go out and do that. Elliott's an interesting one. He had a chance to play himself into pre-season, play himself into contention in pre-season. I'm not entirely sure that he did that. And there will be interest in him towards the end of the window. So again, I think he would kind of like to stay, but I'm just not sure that's going to be an option for him, really. And I think, it could be one where we see that he's kind of nudged towards the exit door. And others like, Mamadashvili, he's in a difficult position at the moment. He's getting dipped in and out occasionally. I don't think he's been fantastic since he signed, but there was big belief in him when he did sign. And Alisson's going to be there for another year. So I think, to give him another year of as backup and see if he kicks on is absolutely fine with me. And Tsimikas, I feel like I'm his biggest defender at times. I think, he's just absolutely fine as your backup left back. I don't think anybody else has a backup left back who absolutely pulls up trees or is flawless. The only reason he got farmed out on loan last season is because they essentially needed to get Kirkes in that summer. Robertson had 1 year left. It made sense to ride that year. But Tsimikas to come in and play League Cup games or whatever, I don't know why anyone is too fussed about that, or like Liverpool need to absolutely sell him 100% this summer. It's just, he's just going to be the backup left back, and he's good at doing that. He's a decent player. He's not the best in the world, but he's okay. And I actually think with Tsimikas, his arrival as a backup kind of coincided with Liverpool suddenly getting so much better in the domestic cups under Jurgen Klopp, because he was a genuine option in that position of a backup who wasn't just a kid. He actually was of a decent level and, was willing to be that within the squad. So, I feel like he gets way too much stick for what he is. He just is the backup left back. It's fine. So not want to be kind of chasing out the door by any means. Maybe you look at it for next summer and you think, okay, could Chambers take his role or whatever, you end up in the situation you end up in. But yeah, just fine for what he is for me. And some of those are fine, and some decisions to make around some of them, but you can't be kind of cutting 9, 10, 11 out of the squad.
And I want to turn to more optimistic questions. I don't know if they are intended to be optimistic, but I'm going to ask them as they are, because
ask them with a smile, yeah.
yeah, because I think the mood is a bit too pessimistic at the moment. But Irfan asks if the squad will be able to compete for top 5 as it is today, and Mikael or Michael, do you think Liverpool seriously can challenge Arsenal, Chelsea, and Man City this season?
Yeah, I think as it stands at the moment, it could get top 5, because it got top 5 pretty much last season, despite playing appallingly for the entire campaign. I mean, they really was just no redeeming features about last season, were there really? Apart from probably winning at Everton is the only time I actually think I enjoyed it. And they didn't even play that well in that game either, to be honest. So that shows you kind of where the floor is really of the squad. And swapping in Jacquet maybe for Canate, okay, that maybe makes it a bit more tricky. But and you're losing Salah, but you're not losing the Salah of the actual version of Salah that we became used to. So they clearly need to kind of make, particularly in that forward line, I think they need to add. But I've got a lot of confidence that, right now, even without doing anything else, I think top 5 is the bare minimum you get, because I expect more from Wirtz. I expect more from Isak. I expect the quality of the coaching and the style of play to kind of boost Liverpool a little bit. So I think definitely top 5 at the moment. And in terms of challenging the others and pushing for the title, without question, for me, need signings. You need to kind of, if you can add Barkley and then by that forward line starts to look really nicely stocked. I think if you sell Jones and you bring someone in to replace him that you've got belief in, and then of course if you sign a defender who can cover right back and centre half, I think everything's looking a lot more rosy then for a potential title challenge. But I'm kind of fascinated, to be honest, by it completely being ruled out that Liverpool could be in contention next season, because, like I say, it only kind of takes 85-ish points now to win it. City have got a new manager, so that could be tricky for them. It poses some challenges as well. So they're in a difficult situation, as Liverpool are, with having changed their manager. I think Arsenal, they're adding Bruno, for example. Does he really raise the ceiling of their football? I think he's a fabulous player, by the way. But I mean, their problem for me is that they aren't elite in attack, and I don't think they've done anything there. Swapping Trossard for Solis is not, for me, kind of taking them to another level. Or, what you would have been worried about them is if they signed Vinicius Jr. or if they didn't have to play Gyökeres most weeks, who for me is, I thought a lot of Arsenal signings bizarrely for a team that won the league last season. And this is not said with any bitterness. I really respect Arsenal. I've not got, and I don't hate them in the way that some people seem to do. I think it's a very online thing, that, but I don't think any of their signings from last summer came off. And I spoke to an Arsenal fan who kind of said that to me, and I thought that's actually kind of true, really. So this idea they've got this like perfect squad and they're making it better I think is just based in the idea that they won the league, which was a fabulous achievement. But their ceiling is not incredibly high to me. It's just that their floor is not low either. So I think they'll be in the mix and they'll be in and around it, but in and around it at 80 odd points, definitely. So there's a chance there. If Liverpool make a decent start, you don't have to win every single game anymore. You don't have to get 95 points. So I think Liverpool can be in the mix with the right signings and with a good start that gives them confidence. Because, like I say, they don't have to be perfect at the back. If the attack really fires, if this style of football lifts them as they would hope, I think he can get more out of it. And I think nobody likes this. I wrote it last week just to kind of to accidentally wind people up, I guess. But, Isak can be like a new signing. Wirtz can be like a new signing. Because if that's the limit of what we expect from them, what we saw last season, then Liverpool are screwed. the negativity is correct. So if we see more from Wirtz, Isak, Kerkez, just to pick out examples, then Liverpool can absolutely fly this season and can, at the very least, I don't expect them to win it, but be up there again.
Mm. And on Wirtz is our next question from Kenny. Should he get the number 10 role, or is maybe Soboslai a better option there? Is his question.
I think it should be Wirtz. I think you put him in a role like that where, it can really work for him. I was so encouraged by, his 45 minutes against Leeds. I thought some of his link up there was really good and how he's kind of really involved in the play. I never thought, Slot did use him in the 10, but he never seemed to be able to get the most out of him last season. So I'm really hoping it. And I loved that he's getting on the end of things in the box to score that goal. That is exactly where I want to see him. Almost pushed up there as a second striker at times because he can finish and he can get those goals. And if he does that, it'll elevate his game. So I think in this system, playing that kind of number 10, that Krupi Jr. role, which is what it was at Bournemouth, will really suit him. So I'm expecting big things from him this season, as I am Isak as well. And, I think all the signings from last summer can do a lot more. So I'm looking forward to that because that more than anything, if you get a bit more out of them, and you throw in some signings on top of it, then Liverpool is, they still only finished fifth last season. They didn't go to 8th or 9th or nearly get relegated like a United or Tottenham. They finished fifth. So if that's the floor, then it doesn't take much to bump the ceiling up, I think.
Question from Christopher. Can any academy players other than Rio and Nyoni make a difference for the first team this season?
Maybe if they keep Chambers about, he could maybe get the odd game if there are injuries at left back. And I don't think they'd want to sign him use him at centre half too much. Really, I think they'd probably prefer him at left back. But maybe he's got an opportunity because I think he's done himself no harm on tour. I think Njai will be in and around it for the League Cup games if Liverpool remain short at centre half. Wouldn't be surprised to see him get minutes. And I think Josh Arbe will get in League Cup squads as well. And probably get minutes, maybe even see an FA Cup start or something like that, because I think he's on, internally, when they were convincing him to sign the new contract, there was a lot of talk about pathway. They had to fend off kind of a lot of money from City and Chelsea. And the way to do that is to promise, this is how we're going to work you into the first team. Now, Rio was doing it around a similar age. So Arbe is rated similarly. So why not really? So I think there's a chance for him to make starts, which, considering he is only just 16, is pretty incredible, really, that he's in the mix for that. So, yeah, looking forward to seeing how he gets on, and I think he will be in and around it. But in terms of majorly sustained impact, I think it is going to be Ngamoura and Yoni again for this season. But outside of that, there's chances for some to be on the fringes, I think.
Yeah, and the Leeds game maybe pushed more of the concern for how the season is going to go. But Hans Christian wants to know, how is the mood in the city with the new manager, and what do you think would be an acceptable first season for him?
Yeah, so just quickly on the concerns around the Leeds game. I mean, they concede 3 goals in the last 20 minutes, I think I'm right in saying. And if you look at the 11 that's on the pitch in those 20 minutes, it's pretty awful, to be honest. It's not an 11 that will be on the pitch for Liverpool at any point. You're down to 4th and 5th choice in certain positions there. And it was a real mishmash of players who've been training twice a week, and Leeds finished the game strong, but they also score a couple from set piece situations that Liverpool can do better in. So I think way too much is being read into that, by the way. And I think more can be read into what happened in the first half when Liverpool were slightly closer to full strength, and they played incredible football and looked absolutely electric. So I'm not personally as worried as some are off the back of that Leeds game, and I don't think people should be too much. But in terms of the mood around the place, I think people they're excited to get back to it, really, in terms of the season ticket holders I speak to and know, and the people who go regularly, really excited to see this style of football, because this is the thing, it might be an emotional reaction and maybe people would disagree with it as a footballing decision, but part of the reason that Slot lost kind of the hold on the crowd, or kind of why people turned against him last season, was not just because of the results, because Liverpool have had bad seasons in the past. The football was just dire. And we saw no signs of it improving on the way out through the season either. It was just pretty awful. So, and as much as it's about winning, yes, and it's about this, that, and the other, people want to be entertained. It is an entertainment business. And, so maybe that makes people idealists, that they want to win and be entertained. But that's been football forever. It's not actually that important. So when you go, and if you go every week, you want to watch something that's actually good. So I think people are excited about that I speak to, and looking forward to this football. And In terms of what they expect from it, I think there's an expectation of kind of, it's probably not going to go back to absolutely smashing it and winning the league at the first ask, but playing a bit better football. You want to have a decent run in the Champions League, of course, and more comfortably finish in the Champions League spots. I mean, for me, it'd be interesting to see what Chelsea do, because they've not got European football, so that makes things easier for them. So maybe that lifts them a little bit. But for me, Liverpool shouldn't be finishing lower than third once they've done all the business. And if they get the business done that I expect them to, that for me should be the bottom of where they finish. But if they finish there, they do so and they play some decent football, and you can see the building blocks being put together, I think there won't be too many complaints.
Some news on the ownership as well this summer, that they are negotiating about selling parts of LFC to a consortium. Speculation as well if they are looking to get a major ownership in a few years, or maybe, I don't know the time frame, but we got some questions about that. Do you think the plan is to sell the club, and would that be good to get new owners?
I do think it's the long-term plan, yeah. I think we've had this speculation before when, you've seen minority stakes sold or interest from elsewhere. I've never really bought into the idea that they were looking to sell, but I think with this one, I'm very much believe that this is the long-term plan here, because I think this minority stake will go through in the end. I think the indications there are that Amit Bhatia has stood down from his role at QPR that he's held for 18 years. You don't do that unless there's some encouragement that this is going somewhere. So I think there's a belief in all parties that they will get something done there. And then in terms of what it means in the long term, the indicators there are a 30% stake it's a minority stake, but it's a sizable one that will cost an awful lot of money. So that clearly gives a path towards an exit potentially, because you generally see, and I think that's Ineos's approach at Manchester United, you see someone take a minority stake with a view to then eventually taking a majority stake, but also you look at the names that are involved, that they're trying to get Jeff Bezos on board, that there are others as well, the guy from Facebook who they're trying to get involved in this consortium, that Lakshmi Mittal is involved already. These are incredibly wealthy people now. You don't need them involved as names. It's not like when, you take over Birmingham City and you get Tom Brady because, he's missed out, huge in America, or Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney taking over Wrexham as big names. You get names like Jeff Bezos involved because they've got unimaginable wealth behind them. And that's the sort of money it takes to take over a £6 billion asset. So that's why they're getting involved, clearly, is with a view to something bigger than a 30% stake, because otherwise they just wouldn't be needed. You don't need to sell Liverpool. It's already a big enough institution as it is. It's just because they've got an awful lot of money. So I think it's clear. This minority stake is coming now with a view to eventually, maybe a few years down the line, but eventually a takeover of Liverpool by this group. So I think that's the clear direction of travel. And in terms of whether it's a good thing or not, I'm always kind of careful what you wish for kind of on these things. I think the Liverpool's owners might not be perfect, but they're up there as some of the best in the Premier League in terms of when you consider the ethics, how they run it on the sporting side, all these kind of things. To lose that would be maybe concerning, but there's also not an awful lot you can do about it. And you just hope they don't fall into the hands of owners that don't care, or run it in a way that doesn't help the club. So you just got to kind of cross your fingers in those situations, really. But I think that's the clear direction of travel as I understand it.
Some of the names being mentioned, maybe not our favorite people, but yeah.
Yeah, but let's be honest, there are no good billionaires, really. So even Liverpool's owners are, I say, ethically ahead of some others. That is true to a degree, but equally, I'm of the view that billionaires shouldn't exist. But this isn't a politics podcast, so.
Do you know if the billionaires who are there now, Ole Jørgen wants to know if there are any plans to expand Anfield further?
I don't think while FSG are in charge. I think if, maybe that would be something that would come onto the agenda with new owners, but we're a little bit far away from that happening right now. I think FSG feel that they've taken it as far as they can. Maybe another owner would feel that they could do more and that there is more expansion to be had there, but it would cost an incredible amount of money. And I think from FSG's perspective, to invest that incredible amount of money now, it's hard to see the return, particularly if we're starting to get to the point where it's the 30% stake is being taken, you're warming up for a sale. You know, the time scale on that is tight to get a new stand built and to put it online. Probably requires compulsory purchase orders of houses behind or around. Very, very difficult to see how they would do that, to be honest, or something then on Walton Brett Road on the Anfield side. It is ridiculously difficult to see how it'll be a huge challenge anyway for anyone who takes it on, but particularly for FSG, I don't see why they would take it on right now because of the timescales involved and the amount of money it would cost them to do it. You wouldn't get a return on that investment in the short term. So probably something for new owners to think about if we do eventually get there.
Mm-hmm. We're going to finish off with a question for you from Robert. What's your favorite Liverpool player of all time? And who is the coolest cult hero the club has had?
Favorite of all time for me, I find it hard to look past Stevie, to be honest. You know, I think there was debate, isn't there, around kind of who's the best and all that. But I think my clear favourite, I think, is Gerrard, just because I think he's in that conversation potentially as the best. But I just think he's just possibly the best all-round footballer I've ever seen. Maybe not the best pure footballer in terms of, you can think of forwards like Lionel Messi, for example. I think he's the greatest player of all time, in my view. And others will have their favourites like Maradona or whatever, or Pele. But I think Gerrard is potentially the greatest just all-round footballer, doing everything to 9 out of 10, a level I don't think we've seen maybe before or since. And the fact he did it for Liverpool, the fact he had this catalogue of goals that were like clutch moments. So he had, on top of being unbelievable at everything, able to play in basically every position at an incredibly high level, he also had this incredible ability to kind of score goals in key moments, iconic moments, in a way that, you know, none of the peers who get compared to him have got those. Just incredible, really. So if you were building a footballer and putting him together, you would be basically Gerrard on 9 things out of 10. He's just an incredible footballer, and yeah, what a pleasure to be able to watch him, and that he was a Liverpudlian playing for Liverpool for pretty much his entire career. Just a joy, really. So he's definitely my number one favourite, I'd say. And what was the other question there? Sorry.
Who is the coolest cult hero the club has had?
I don't know if is Joe Allen a cult hero? I only mention him because I just really liked him when I met him when I was working at the club at that time. He was just one of the most kind of normal. You just wouldn't mistake him for a footballer if you bumped into him. Just a real, not that all footballers are strange, by the way. A lot of them are normal, but he's just incredibly normal guy, and I just really polite, nice guy, and I just liked him. So I'm going to call him a cult hero anyway, because I really liked him.
The Welsh Shabby.
Yes, exactly.
I think that qualifies to be a cult hero, to have that name tag.
Yeah. Probably didn't do him any favors, to be honest, but yeah.
Okay, that's all. Thank you so much for your insight. I think you may have calmed some people down and at least made us much wiser.
Well, just to that, I would say, honestly, I saw the kind of some of the head losses that were going on social media kind of prior to the Mbaye news coming out. That's really settled everyone down. And I think it shows you sometimes that people just need a link to calm them down, a link to a player, even if it's not. And it's like, well, it shouldn't be like that. I think the only concern anyone should have is that when it comes to the end of the window, that Liverpool have enough to be up there and to be better than they were last season. And I think you can be convinced that they will do that. There's a lot of business to do yet. They're working behind the scenes, and we don't know everything that goes on. I would never, ever say that I know everything that goes on. I know bits and bobs, and I try and share that. But, I don't know half the picture half the time. And that's because that's the nature of journalism. And, it's all a mystery a lot of the time. But, if you are finding out that you're getting dragged into kind of thinking, oh, it's all terrible and they're not doing anything and all these other clubs are being linked to X, Y, and Z. Well, it's like, maybe just take a break from social media in the summer, because I think it's sending some people loopy, and I think a lot of the time you spend the whole summer worrying about how it's going to pan out, and come the end of it, Barkala might be in the door, or in a couple of other forwards, and maybe a defender at the end of it. And you look at the squad and think, well, it's actually not that bad. Plus you throw in, I think they're going to improve under Iraola as well. Just generally, I think you get more out of players that are already there, which is exciting. I think there's a lot to look forward to. So don't. My only thing I would say is, like, don't get bogged down by that. We don't know half of what's going on most of the time. So and that includes journalists in that. So if you haven't heard about anything happening, don't worry. There's probably stuff going on anyway.
And why should you follow a team if you're not looking forward to watching them play? So
exactly.
Yeah. Again, thank you so much, and we'll talk again soon.